Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. Today I got a fun and exciting episode for you guys today because the Analogue 3D console is out. That's what I would say if they managed to actually ship the console along with the companion 8BitDo 64 Bluetooth controller. But half of the set is here. It arrived in an Amazon box early this morning, so I figured I would take it apart, go over all of the contents, test it, and tell you guys exactly what I think about it. Because honestly, you guys are about as excited about this controller as you are the console. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But obviously I've talked a lot about 8BitDo or 8BitDo, depending on how you want to pronounce it on the channel, because they make a controller for basically every classic system setup out there. And it's one of those things with the MiSTer FPGA Nintendo 64 core and with Analogue 3D coming, trying to get a controller that's both modern and also has the same button layout for Nintendo 64 can be a bit of a chore. By default, I've been using the Brawler 64 controller for all of my N64 captures, and while the build quality isn't quite as nice as something like 8BitDo or 8BitDo's is, it is still a great controller that does everything I need modernizing the controller, because honestly, I really don't like the Trident design. It's always cramped my hand. If you love it, that's totally fine. I'm not here to convince you it's not great. I'm just saying it's not for me. Now if we take a look at the back of the box, it says Analogue 3D, it says Windows, Switch, and Android. Obviously, I didn't test Switch or Android, that's not why I picked the controller up, but I've heard good things. I am here to test Windows as well as to test MiSTer FPGA, because of course at this point in time, trying to actually test the Analogue 3D is an impossibility. It doesn't exist yet. Let's go ahead and open up the box in about the stupidest way possible by using a kitchen knife over the camera so I can actually try to see what I'm doing. And yes, I just did manage to cut the box open and actually damage the cardboard, but honestly, it's not a collector's item. Really isn't going to do too much to me. I'm not going to feel bad about that. Just kind of made a mistake. Now once we actually get inside of the box, I'll give Analogue marks for keeping the thing white all the way through, although I'm assuming that if you buy the black controller, the box might be white as well. I haven't actually seen anything about that. But really what you get in the package is the controller and a charging cable. That's about all you would expect out of a controller, but there's nothing special here to signal that this is for the Analogue 3D, outside of the fact that it is on the back of the box. And if you're not aware, Analogue as well as 8BitDo or 8BitDo do have a relationship business-wise, so they're not quite the same company, but they're not completely separate companies either. They kind of do a little bit of intermixing. Now if you actually take a look at the controller, obviously it has the Nintendo 64 layout. You have the analog stick, which is going to be Hall effect, and it is gated. You have the B and A buttons as well as C up, left, right, and down. You have a D-pad to start, and then all of the different buttons that would be useful for something like Analogue 3D, MiSTer FPGA, or other system buttons that you wouldn't really use on N64. And as far as the analog stick is concerned, it feels nice in the hand, and of course it would need to be gated, and it is here. So you'll see you have those 8 different hard stops, and later on in the video I will use the analog gate testing ROM to show you exactly where those values hit to see whether or not they're in alignment. But spoiler alert, for the most part they are, but there was a couple of values that definitely were not correct. But the thing about the gated gate is you really want to have that for N64, because that's how the original controller was laid up, and that is the feel of something like N64 controls. Now pretty much everyone who makes an aftermarket controller for this console does put the gate in there because that's what is expected, but as far as actually hitting the corners on that analog and getting them to stay, it didn't really feel any different than a traditional controller. And honestly, with old controllers, if you haven't already changed out the parts, that analog stick is probably completely trashed. It is much nicer in a modern variant. Now as far as the buttons are concerned, everything is the appropriate size and everything does feel good under the thumb. The buttons have a nice tactile feel, you know when you press them, and they spring back quickly. So as far as all the buttons are concerned, the face buttons, absolutely no issues with them whatsoever. There is a slight model texture to the controller. I shot this at 6K, but I'm sure YouTube will compress it down so it's hard to see. And it is domed right here, ever so raised up on those C buttons as well. Now the one thing right off the top that I've never loved about 8BitDo controllers, and I still don't love here, is the D-pad is just feeling a little bit imprecise and a little bit mushy. I think they make a great controller, but their D-pads have always been not my favorite thing in the world, and there's nothing here in this design that's going to change my mind on that. It is a B+ tier D-pad. It's never going to raise to the upper echelons of best D-pads of all time, but then again, nothing can ever take the Sega Saturn controller crown. And as far as the top of the controller, you're going to have left and right and 2 Z buttons, as well as a sync button and the USB-C port, basically what you'd expect to see on any controller. Now around the back we're going to have left and right and those two Z buttons as well, basically trigger setup, and they do have a slight lip to them. Everything feels nice and tactile here, outside of the D-pad feeling a little bit mushy, and that is just to my personal taste. Don't go down below and yell at me and saying I'm saying bad things just to do it. It is just my opinion. You will see here that the Z buttons do have a slight lip to them, so when you actually rest your fingers on them, it's not going to really slip off. You'd have to be hitting it like it owes you money for that to happen. And on the back you're going to see the small tactile switch to switch modes out. You really can't screw that up and change it mid-gameplay session. You'd have to basically be digging at the back of the controller to do so. Now, as far as the hand feel is concerned, that's what 100% makes or breaks a controller for me, and honestly, I have absolutely no issues, no complaints about this controller whatsoever. It feels nice in my hand, everything is where I would expect it to. I can hit every single button with my thumbs the way I need it to, outside of the menu buttons, which of course would not be part of traditional gameplay, and really shouldn't or don't need to have to be able to be hit with your thumb when you're holding the controller in a standard configuration. But honestly, it feels like a really nice build quality, and I have absolutely nothing bad to say about that. Now, I was planning a teardown, but I wanted to test it first, and honestly, I do not know how to get this plastic apart. I tried with a spreader, nothing wanted to move, and it definitely had all of the vibes of it was going to break if I actually tried to take it apart. So as far as repairability is concerned, I have no idea. If you can actually get into the thing, let me know how you did that, because it basically is a sealed unit. And it's one of those things, Nintendo 64 controllers, especially original ones, unless you maintenance them and keep them running, can be very problematic. Now on the MiSTer FPGA side of things, I've done videos talking about all the different type of controllers we can use, including original controllers. This atomic purple here is one that I've actually maintenance and works really well. Now I usually use the Brawler 64 for Nintendo 64 MiSTer FPGA, because it just works for me. But I tested this controller with MiSTer and I did it via USB. I usually don't use wireless because I live in a house with plaster walls and chicken wire inside of them, and basically any wireless signal just acts like a giant Faraday cage in my house. It completely drops. But over wired, I was able to pair the controller perfectly fine. I was able to bind all of the buttons in the MiSTer main menu, and it just worked within the core. But let's take a look at some of the analog value testing, because some of these other controllers can definitely kind of play around with where the analog value should be. And the MiSTer FPGA core, it is slightly self-adjusting, so I'm actually in Ari's here, the Windows emulator for Nintendo 64, and you're going to see that for the most part we hit all the corners the way we need to be, but on one of the axes it's actually jumping out a little bit too far. It's at a value of 69 and negative 69. Normally I would say nice there, but you can see it's ever so slightly too far beyond. So maybe on that one direction you might end up moving an analog value slightly faster than the original console would expect, but I don't really think that that's going to be much of a problem, because honestly it's barely outside of that calibration testing, but I knew you'd want to see that sort of thing. Now, one of my favorite tests for the gates and an analog stick on Nintendo 64 is Super Mario 64. All the maneuverability of Mario, all of the quick jumps, the turns, the kicks, all of the long jumps, you want every single button to be responsive, and you need that analog stick to basically flick every direction you want quick enough so that Mario can execute all of those different diverse moves Nintendo gave him. And as far as my Super Mario 64 test is concerned, absolutely nothing about this controller gave me any sort of pause, pun very much intended, when I was controlling Mario. But I would say the same thing about my Brawler 64, does the same thing. The nice thing is we now have options on the market, and of course this is going to work with Analogue 3D, and I have no idea if something like the Brawler 64 controller would work with that console until it actually arrives, but I will definitely be testing some other aftermarket controllers to see exactly what works, what doesn't work. That way I can tell you what it is you might want to buy or might not want to buy. Now, the problem with this review is it has to be incomplete, because obviously at the time of recording this we do not have an Analogue 3D out on the market. It's not like I got one early for testing, and I don't think anyone's received one either. It says it's shipping at the end of August, so hopefully soon, maybe the next 6 weeks or so, I'll actually be able to marry this 8BitDo controller to the Analogue 3D and report how it works there, because it works fine on MiSTer FPGA, it worked fine on areas outside of that one axis being actually a little bit beyond where the analog value should be. But honestly, this thing was clearly made to be a partner controller to the Analogue 3D as far as wireless is concerned. And if you want wireless testing, I really apologize. I can never be definitively sure if any issues I experience with wireless controller protocols are down to the controller's issue or down to the fact that my chicken wire walls absolutely eat signal, and I want to give you guys the most accurate information. And when I can't tell whether it's my house causing the issue or the controller causing the issue, I don't feel comfortable telling you what is going on. But I did ask one person I trust on the MiSTer FPGA side of things to test it because they received their unit this morning and they had no issues at all connecting it wirelessly, so you should be totally fine. It's just one of those things. I really want to give you accurate information, and chicken wire walls do not allow me to do so. But as far as this new controller is concerned, outside of a mushy D-pad, and honestly that's just kind of part and parcel of 8BitDo products at this point in time, absolutely no issues with it whatsoever. It's comfortable, it does the job, and outside of being slightly out of alignment on one of the 8 gates on the analog value, nothing really here, at least short term, that I would say is anything other than a buy. It's a totally fine controller. If you already have a controller you love, I don't know if I would upgrade, but that's totally up to you, and hopefully soon I'll be able to pair it to Analogue 3D. But we're done. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.